Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Visibility Factor podcast. This is Sue Barber, your host. I'm thrilled today to bring my guest to you, Helen Honisett, who has a really unique approach to leadership, the things that she's doing to help leaders grow and gain clarity for themselves, and what she does in organizations. She has a book, she has a podcast, she's done it all. So I'm so thrilled to have you here, Helen. I would love you to share a little bit about yourself with the audience.
Thank you, Sue. So, as you said, I'm Helen Honisett. I am the CEO of the company Defy Expectations. And most of you may be able to tell by my accent that I'm not based in the US. I am actually based in Oxford in the UK, where it is wonderfully and on trend tipping with rain. So, we're based over here in the UK. Now, what I've done in my career, to very quick bio, is nearly 30 years in sales and leadership roles, starting my career at a young age selling sausages and then moving up through corporates into SVP, large global sales and marketing leads. And then in 2019, after I published and wrote a book, which never really meant to be a book, but we might get to that later on, I started the company Defy Expectations to really look at leadership in a slightly different way and to really focus on making sure leaders have clarity on what they are or where they are, what they want to achieve and how they can get there. Because quite often, actually, we don't know what great leadership looks like. We sort of pick up what it doesn't look like from some of the leaders around us who we haven't necessarily thrived under. So it's a really quick bio from me.
Okay, could I just ask about the selling sausages part?
This was one of the endless, I had many fascinating jobs when I was at university, where
Okay.
I went into a recruitment company. They did temp recruiting and contract work. And I went, I want a job. And they went, well, you're far too experienced. You've got A-levels, you've got GCSEs, we do temporary work, like, selling sausages in a butcher's, or I was pouring concrete at one point, or I was doing coffee for, some senior executives in another. And I was like, I don't care. I am here to earn some money to cover university costs. I'm not leaving until I've got a job. And they were very sweet and they brought me a cup of coffee. And eventually they went, okay, you're serious about this? I was like, yeah, I really don't care what I'm doing. And that first job was literally going in and helping butchers pack up, position and go and sell a load of their sausages in Smithfield Market in London. It was only a couple of days, but it was enough. It's a great attitude.
Well, it's your first sales role, really, right?
How to sell a sausage.
Sell, position, market, all of that stuff came. Yeah, who knows where you're going to get these skill sets from, but what a great story. I love that. So let's talk about what came first for you, because I love the way you described it, which is we look at leadership for the things that are not working versus looking at it for the things that maybe could be working or could be looked at differently.
So I was very fortunate in some ways. In most of the beginning of my career, I had good managers and leaders, no one who treated me badly. And I sort of took it for granted. I was seen as a human. I was pushed. I was encouraged. I was given opportunities. I wasn't necessarily systematically developed, but people were there and they saw a job in nurturing and developing me. And that became the norm. And I think for most people, that level of management and leadership is the norm. And it's only when you then have a manager who doesn't see you as a human, sees you as someone who is there to do things for them, that you start to sense that, okay, this isn't right. Actually, I've got more to offer. Or a leader that doesn't believe in developing their people, or a leader who won't spend the time to get to know you, literally is only bothered by your output, not necessarily the outcome, and isn't there to see you thrive, is just see you tick the boxes that need to be ticked. And it's only when we get to that position that we start to realize that there are leaders out there that aren't as good. But what we don't really then think about is, what does an exceptional leader look like? What does a great leader look like? If we've all got used to and taken for granted good leadership, what does great leadership look like? And how could that make a massive difference in people's lives? When I speak to people who are going through bad leadership or have come out the other end of bad leadership, they took it home. It impacted their well-being, impacted their personal lives. It quite often impacted their relationships. And it impacts us on all levels in a way that is impossible to compartmentalize. We can't just leave it at work. flip that. What does a great leader do? How does that impact you on every level, from your well-being to your relationships, to your professional development, to your personal development? That's where I think it's really interesting. And that's why I'm so keen to give leaders the clarity of where they are, because the more leaders we can get to great from good, the impact, the seismic ripples that we could have are huge.
I totally agree. And I think I was really fortunate as well. You look at these people and they're supposed to help you, is kind of how I thought about it. They're supposed to be here to help you and guide you. Do you feel like the amount of time availability that people have is part of this impact, where leaders used to have a lot more time?
Yeah, and what I'm about to say may be seen as controversial, but I think it's had a really negative impact on organizations as well. But because that lack of time and the pressures of all the constant on, so the 24/7 availability stuff. I've worked in roles where I worked across markets, including the Middle East, so there was not a day off, and you're in every single time zone, so there's no downtime. So yes, that global pressure is definitely there. And what's happened is, because of that, effectiveness of leaders who should be more senior has dropped. And therefore, decisions are going further up. Strategic thinking is not being pushed down organizations. Decision making is not being pushed down organizations. And people who are in theory and on paper in senior roles are actually just managers. They're not leaders. And that's the bit that may be sort of controversial, because you might have an EVP or an SVP title, but you're fundamentally just managing the people and the business. You're not leading them.
Yeah.
And I think that has come because we are so constantly in this fight and flight state of just trying to get through everything.
That is brilliant. I've seen the same. And I think where I came from, at a certain point in time, the company changed hands. And I think what happened is the whole culture shifted, and what was expected or how things worked was different. When I grew up, it was figure it out.
Yeah.
So I think, different leadership styles, different company cultures all play a role in this. But I feel like there's just this moment right now where we just don't have enough really great leaders. So I love what you're doing. I think it is going to make such a difference for companies to really succeed in the best way and be able to handle whatever change comes their way.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's changed is the goalposts are being moved on a more regular basis. So it used to be, and it was when I started my career, that I got my annual budget. I know that might change next year, but this was my budget for this year. And I could play with this. I could do with this what I wanted. Now what we're seeing is every quarter budget's being pulled back, or can you save this? So actually people aren't making decisions because they feel as though any decision they make now is going to be wrong in a few months' time because the goalposts have moved or shrunk. And so what we're getting is this paralysis in decision making, which means there's an increase in ineffectiveness and inefficiency because people literally are just holding their breath because they don't know what's going to happen next. If you've had a budget to do training and then that goes the next day, but you've organized the training, what do you do? As a very small example.
That's not something I've heard specifically. I know when we looked at budgets, it was semi-annually. We would have the original budget and then we would look at it in May, June, maybe do a few changes, right, depending on where things were. But every quarter, to your point, is very short-sighted and doesn't allow for any strategic thinking because you're only looking at the cost at that moment and not thinking about the bigger picture.
And it doesn't allow for experimentation, which is the first step towards innovation.
Right.
If we're not letting our teams make mistakes and try things out and experiment, we're never going to innovate. So again, that's why I think we're seeing these sort of cycles of innovation, which should be speeding up, in many ways slowing down, because actually organizations aren't willing to take a punt, try something out, give it a go, see what happens, figure what works and what doesn't.
I love that you shared all that because I think that's important for people to hear. How is this impacting the newer generations who are joining the organization?
I think this is such a fascinating one. So very recently, my 9-year-old came wandering up to me and said, "Mummy, I've pulled together a Google slide or two about your website."
Oh my gosh, I love that.
He wanted to share his views on so we have actually done a bit of a rebrand and a sort of a color shift and all that sort of, based on a 9-year-old's view. He came to us having thought it through, having prepared, and actually having really, really clear guidance. He was like, "You're not bold enough. It's too much going on." There was real thought that had been put into it.
Wow.
And I stepped back and thought, oh my God, when I was 9, it wouldn't have even crossed my mind to investigate what my mum was up to, have a look at her work, and then make suggestions of how I could improve it. So I actually think there is huge value in looking at some of the younger generations and what they can bring, because those sort of boundaries between the generations, I was very much brought up with grandparents where we were sort of seen, definitely not heard, and very much sort of seen, preferably not. And so we wouldn't have dared to have that, or well, what would have been considered audaciousness back then. Now I look at it and go, brilliant, this is different perspectives. So I think there's huge amounts of advantage working and listening with some of the generations below us to really hear what they have to say. And we've got a couple within the business in Defy Expectations who work with us who, some of them are 30 years younger than me. And the things that they say, you just can't go, yeah, that's really on point. And they've got some views about some of the multi-generation. One of them, Alex, who's actually the daughter of one of our associates, did a podcast with me on exactly this. And she sort of said there are some great advantages in this new way of working and slightly flatter hierarchies, etc. But she said there's also some disadvantages because we're being listened to for our opinion, but there's less people sort of saying, actually, this is how to do it. She's also said there is less time to figure things out because everything is expected so quickly. And so I see huge advantages in learning. A flip side to the other side, you mentioned you want to talk about AI later. Well, the two people leading our AI Academy are 78 and 74. And the reason they're doing it is one of them was the first CEO of the first international service provider who rolled out internet and commercial internet across Europe. And the second one was head of the Lotus Notes user group who introduced email into workplaces across Europe. So they have got, again, a really different perspective and huge amount of experience of what went badly wrong last time. What were the unseen sort of implications of these new and exciting technologies? What were the advantages, but actually what were some of the risks as well? So I think as we look across the spans of generations in the workplace, the more we can leverage the strengths of all, but also acknowledge that actually there are development areas for all of us at all points of our lives, the better. And whilst that flatter hierarchy and that willingness to step forward and speak up so openly, like I got schooled by my 9-year-old on website design. But there are also some expectations where you just have to sort of step back and sometimes go, that's not actually how it best works. And that's not to say that this is how we've always done it, but there are ways that experience has taught us work rather than speed or efficiency or any of those sort of technologies that are brilliant, but actually sometimes just a hug and a conversation is the most effective thing. Whereas actually, sometimes we just throw technology at the answer instead.
Okay, wow. So much brilliance in all that you just shared there. First of all, kudos to you as his mom, because that doesn't happen without you creating that environment of letting him speak up and wanting to hear his opinion. And I get the PowerPoints for Christmas of what I would like for Christmas. It's laid out beautifully with links and all of the sizes, and it's beautiful. I said, if you want those things, you have to lay it out for me. So they've learned that that is the approach, either a Word, a Google Doc, or a PowerPoint. But I love that you shared that perspective of the multiple generations. And I wish more people were taking advantage of the strengths of those generations, right? They all went through things. They all have wisdom to share. But I think sometimes, the younger generations are not being heard. It's just do what I tell you to. And I love the perspective of Alex because I'm seeing the same thing, in my own kids, where they're coming to me saying, this is what I've been asked to do. No one is giving me a lot of guidance and I can't even get a hold of them. So how could I do this? And thank God, I've been through enough and I can give them some insights into what they might consider. But they're very thoughtful and they understand a lot of things, but they just haven't had the exposure to all these things. They're Googling, they're chat GPTing to find out information or reaching out to people, but it may not be what you want. So let's just be clear about the outcome you want, let them ask questions, share what you're looking for, but let them figure out how to do it.
Without dehumanizing the development. And I think that's important because we do learn through a relationship between, coach or coachee, mentor, mentee, teacher, pupil. There is that shared relationship. But I also think there's between the different generations these could be, I mean, they are sweeping stereotypes, but if we look at the generation above me, they were children of the Second World War. The resilience they have, the ability to think on their feet through ambiguity, through hardship, through, sort of tough times, and capitalize on that is absolutely there. The next generation coming up are far more emotionally aware, emotionally sensitive, and emotionally open, and can articulate their needs in a way that the generation above me can't. So again, learning each of those strengths and bringing them into the workplace is so important, because we know emotional intelligence is critical to success, especially in leaders. But we also know resilience is as well.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be good times. So how do we learn from each other?
And we have, 5 and almost 6 generations right now in the workplace. There's just a lot of people that are leaving the workplace, and a lot of that knowledge and experience and wisdom is going with them. I think we should take advantage of that and see it as a positive and not kind of try to push it away. Well, I could talk to you about that topic in leadership all day long for sure. So let's talk a little bit about your book, because I know there's some great things that have come out of that that were really kind of foundational for you. So talk about your book, who it's for, why you wrote it, all of that.
So I can remember in my career, I always used to get given the waifs and strays, the teams that never quite fitted or weren't hitting target, or the people that organizations didn't want to get rid of because they saw their value but didn't quite know where they fit. And a senior leader walked past my desk once in London and said, "Helen, what is it that you do? Because every team that we give to you, within 6 months, they're turning around and they're doing exactly what we need them to do." And he went, "Go and write it down." And it didn't sort of initiate immediate action, but it just sat there. I was like, what do I do? Because again and again, I was given these teams. And I was moved around organizations and given yet more teams. And then eventually I was in Hong Kong for a weekend, and I didn't have anything to do apart from sit in the hotel bar and drink endless cups of tea. And this question, sort of write it down. What is it? What is it that I do? And I started writing. And it really was to figure out what I did rather than have a book. But by the time I got to about 60,000 words, so someone sort of said to me, "You should really pull this together, get some structure and turn this into a book, because it's interesting." Because what happened was I figured out the sort of magic bullet that I was using was genuine care for all of these individuals on my team. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was, I spent time getting to know them, understanding who they were, understanding what they were trying to achieve personally and professionally, and then helping them do that in a way that demonstrated that I actually saw them as a human and I actually cared about them. And so the concept of the book is around what I call love leadership, which is how to unite people using love, integrity, and trust. So really starting to see people as humans, because it's so easy in today's world to, again, see them as people who just get stuff done for you, especially when you've got a multi-tiered organization underneath you. So that was where the book came from. It's also got a lot of personal story in it about how this also led to me understanding who I was and trying to understand a lot of my flaws and a lot of the things that were holding me back. And I have to say, the book was published in 2019, and that work has still continued and will continue. There are many flaws that I still need to explore. But really starting to understand who I was and how I led allowed me to then turn it into something quite systematic as well.
I love that, because I think that is the thing that I did not do when I first became a manager, and was a gap for me, is not really thinking about who do I want to be as a leader? How do I want to lead? What are my values? I didn't really spend time. And now I have a class that I do with people called Leadership Foundations, which is helping people get to that place of spending time thinking about that, reflecting on it. So I think your book would be a great way for them to start to really think about how they can approach their teams as human beings with care. I just don't think that's talked about, right? It's get it done. We don't care if they can't do it, we'll get somebody else in here to do it. And I think I grew up in one that was very focused on seeing me as a human, listening to me, giving me opportunities that most people probably wouldn't have given me on paper, and kind of throwing me into the ocean a little bit to see how I would do. And I think that taught me a lot. And I so appreciate those people for doing that for me, because I don't know that I would have been able to do it for myself.
No, I think it's really hard. I mean, I was very lucky. The company I worked for at the time, Cisco, when I really started getting into leadership and management roles, massive tech organization. You'd expect them to be not very human focused. But John Chambers, who was the CEO at the time, he called us the Cisco family. And now everyone sort of
Oh,
goes, oh, no, we can't. But actually, he acted like that. When you met
yes.
him, he remembered your last conversation, even if it was like 5 seconds long. He knew who you were. You knew what you did. There was always a sense that actually if you put your hand up to volunteer, you'd get pushed. Go try something new, go do different things, go and experiment, go and actually see what could happen. Failure was seen as a great opportunity for everybody to learn. And that was really where I sort of cut my teeth as a manager, was in that environment. And it just became a sort of, that's how I was expected and to grow up and be. But again, it wasn't until quite later on that I did okay, what are my values? What do I stand for? So I think that is a critical piece of foundational
Hmm.
leadership that is left far too late for many.
Yes, agree. Well, I love that he created that environment. Everything starts at the top in my mind, right? You can create a great culture within a certain team, but I think the overall culture of the organization starts at the top, and people take their cues from how people treat other people. So I love that you talked about him. I have a friend who works for Cisco now, and she very much talks about it like a family and all the people that she works with. And she, loves her job. She
Yeah.
absolutely loves her job. And I think that comes through because of culture, and maybe because of what John started, and it continues today.
Yeah. It was always the tagline, "We are Cisco," and it just runs. It's the "we are." There wasn't
Yeah.
anything like Cisco's this logo, and
Yeah.
it was actually "We are," everybody is. And for a tech company, that just was just such a wonderful environment to be in.
Yes. 100%. I know you have a really unique way of working with leaders, which is leveraging your diagnostic tool, Leadership Defined. And I would love to know how that came to be. How is it helping people? Like, what are some of the outcomes, if you can share?
So it came out of frustration, which is sometimes where the best ideas come from. So what we were looking for, and at the time we were starting to really grow the business, it was about 2020, 2021, and we were looking for a tool that measured someone's leadership competencies, not their personality type. And we had all invested quite a bit in learning how to be practitioners of Profit or Prism, or sort of we partner with a disc company. All this, and what we found were these were great at determining the sort of person you were. But what it didn't tell us was how you operate as a leader. And so we took this internal frustration and went, right, okay, as we are, we're going to sit down, we're going to go, what does great leadership look like? What are all the competencies, behaviors, mindsets, skills that you need to call yourself a great leader? How do you operate in real life experiences? How do you operate when the chips are down? So what are the trade-offs that you will make, etc.? How do you respond under pressure? And we built this very large competency framework against 6 critical aspects of leadership. And those are transformational leadership, risk management, customer focused leadership, optimizing productivity, managing well-being, and creating cultures of openness. So looking at the whole range of really running a hardcore business with risk management and customer focused leadership, through change with transformational leadership and culture of openness, and then into actually how do you make people thrive, not just survive, with well-being and with optimizing productivity. And from that, we then have created, and it's gone through a few iterations over the last few years. When we first launched it in 2021, it was a sort of sliding scale. This is how I operate. We've now taken it to be a little bit more complex. It's actually a multiple choice questionnaire, 90 questions across those 6 topics. And they're sort of worded in a way to slightly catch you out, obviously. But what it gives you is real clarity of how you operate in a situation. So, for example, one of the questions that I'm trying to remember off the top of my head is, what happens if one of your team members comes to you asking for a reduced workload during an incredibly busy period? What do you do? And one of the options is sit down with them to reprioritize and make sure that you actually create an environment where they are successful. Another option is ask them just to hold on for the next week or two whilst you see if you can get additional resources. So another which is smile and sort of smile, but actually not do anything, which is amazingly common. So what we're trying to do is actually get people to respond in a way where they are demonstrating how they bring leadership skills and behaviors, real competencies and capabilities into life, into situations. So it's not a what would you do if, it's actually what do you do when this happens. What we have found is there's two real outcomes from it. The first is what we've found is that it gives people insight into where they're performing well and where their development needs to be. And interestingly enough, what we find, and we have found this across the board, every single leader who has taken this has scored worse in managing well-being than anywhere else. And quite a lot of that comes down to role modeling behaviors. So if extra workload comes into your team, what do? One of the answers is share it out evenly, find out who's got bandwidth, take it on myself and manage it and know that I've got a few weeks of longer hours. Guess which is the most ticked answer? So we're starting to see real trends come out of it, but it gives clarity about where there are systematic problems within an organization. So under-resourced, structures aren't working, systems and processes aren't up to scratch or aren't fit for purpose anymore. Or it gives leaders a really clear area where they can then develop their skills better. But also then what it does for HR and L&D teams is identify people where, for example, if someone's scoring really low on this, usually what we recommend is not coaching or mentoring externally or more training development. It's get the line manager. What's happening with that line manager relationship? Where's the on-the-job coaching? Get support internally because this person isn't yet ready to be a leader. Then we get people right at the very top who are performing exceptionally well, and we go, what's the next job for them?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of investing money on those two cohorts, which quite often do sit on L&D lists as people to target, actually you can invest much more wisely by targeting that middle group who could then go off and do a leadership academy as a small cohort, because what we're actually seeing is fundamental knowledge lacking. Or we may recommend coaching because actually that individual needs to develop confidence and expertise in their own knowledge and understanding. Or we may suggest mentoring because what they need is their handheld, going back to a conversation we were having earlier, by someone who has been there and done it before. And so we see more targeted investment. We see therefore better return on that investment and outcomes based on that investment. And we also, and this is the big one, I think, for many organizations, see where there are systematic issues rather than bad training and development.
Yeah. Wow, that's brilliant. Because I think, when I became a manager, I got a 3-day training and it was like, be on your way. And, had I not had strong leaders to help me, I don't know that I would have succeeded. And you just don't know what you don't know. And what I love about this assessment is that it's very targeted into doing the right things for the person and the company
Yeah.
and helping them in the best way. It's not a, one size fits all. What's the feedback been from companies?
So organizations love the fact that they can get clarity, because one of the other problems, if you're rolling out a 6-month leadership development program, for example, you don't actually know what's happening a lot of the time in that learning contract between the pupil and the coach or the teacher. And so you don't necessarily see where the behaviors are changing, or it takes quite a lot of time for the behaviors to change. We get feedback that they like having because what we say is we will only start here. We're not going to coach someone because actually it's a waste of money. Partly because the first 25% of all coaching is, so where do you want to focus your time and energy in this coach? You're starting with conversations that are nice to have that you could have got the answer to from a diagnostic. And thirdly, what we're starting to see is more and more companies realize that it's if leadership works, the organization works. If we look at some of the big failings, for example, P&O in Europe, that failed due to bad leadership. It wasn't bad intent. It was incompetence in reality. And what we see in many organizations is it's not bad intent. It's not bad action. It's actually people don't know what they're doing. So if we can catch that early, And if we can then put mitigation plans in place, organizations know that they're spending money where they are going to get return on investment and more focus and more outcome that they want to.
I mean, it makes such logical sense, Helen.
It does. It's interesting because we do get a lot of people going, "Oh, but we just want coaching." And we're like, "Well, we're not the right partner for you. If you just want coaching without clarity, then it's just a series of lovely conversations."
Okay, I know we only have so much time and I'm struggling because I want to ask you so many more things. But let's talk about AI for leaders. I would
Mm.
love to know what your approach is or what your thinking is around that, because I think there's a lot of people who are embracing a chat GPT, right? Asking a lot of questions of it, but a lot of people are afraid of it and are not sure what it means. So what are you seeing in companies? How are they looking at it? And what are you doing in your own company?
So what we see in other companies are pockets, and it's exactly that. There are those leaders who love to try stuff out, and they are trying stuff out, and then leaders who are a little bit more hesitant and aren't necessarily trying things out. And what happens then is you get a mismatch in processes and systems that operate across an organization, which leads to a breakdown of collaboration and a breakdown of actually effective working. So that's one of the sort of issues that we're going to start really see happening without systematic rollout and strategic alignment about how this tool is going to be used. It's incredibly powerful, it's wonderful, and it's only going to go and get better, and it's saving many of us time already. But if we just throw a tool into an organization and go ahead and use it, guys, we have no idea what it's going to replace, what cracks it's covering up that will become seismic holes over time, and what that actually means to helping us achieve the strategic objectives of the organization. So going back to Michael, who leads our AI Academy and was head of the Lotus Notes user group. I'm not sure anybody in Lotus Notes really realized that when you give email to salespeople stop phoning people. And so all of a sudden sales became transactional. And those individuals who can truly master strategic sales in a human-centered way elevated through organizations, but the level of mediocrity in salespeople grew. And there's some really interesting research by the Rain Group that looked at the gap between elite salespeople and mediocre salespeople, and it's only getting bigger. And the line of elite salespeople is getting thinner, which is worrying. But again, because we're relying on technology rather than relying on a human to human relationship, which is what business is. So I'm a strong believer that leaders who don't use AI will be replaced by leaders who do use AI. But I'm also a believer that leaders who use AI will be replaced by leaders who use AI and can engage with humans on a human level. We need both sides. So what we're doing with AI internally is we're not teaching companies how to use it. We're teaching companies how to step back, re-engage with their strategic objectives, and look at how AI could fit in to enhance, accelerate, and enrich processes and systems that already align to those objectives and help them achieve them faster. So it's not, oh, just drop chat GPT into your sales team and they could use it to find and do outreach. It's okay. So is outreach currently an issue for us, or is the issue account management? And in which case, can AI be used to deepen and improve our account management rather than our outreach? Questions like that, which are business questions, not technology questions. But this has to be a conversation that's had with the CIO or the CTO at the table, because it's about aligning technology to strategic outcomes. And that's what we do in the AI Academy, is we break it down to really understand what this can do, how you can leverage it, and then how you can go through that process of stepping back and going, right, how do we use this really exciting new tech to enhance, accelerate, and enable us to get to where we want to?
Oh, I mean, that's amazing. I think even just the clarity of you stating what you just shared can be so helpful for people, because I think it's great to know that somebody is really thinking about it this way. There just seems to be such a miscommunication in so many ways, and you only hear what you hear maybe in the media or online, and you don't really understand the bigger picture of how to use it, how to implement it strategically, and are you solving the problem that you're really trying to solve? Or are you just covering up? I love the way you shared that example with sales.
And one of the other things as well is it helps us with the business models behind this as well. Everyone is looking for ROI on AI, but everyone's looking financial ROI. What is the strategic ROI? So can we actually decrease the timelines to get to our strategic outcomes? What's the capability ROI? So can we take those really busy leaders and free up 20% of their time with intelligent AI so they can then lead the business? So there's capability ROI. What is the ROI around just really simple actions like cultural ROI? How can we use this to shift away from what is quite often a 60 to 80-hour working week by leveraging this tool to get us back to a 40 to 50-hour working week and therefore improve the well-being and productivity of our people? If we look at countries like France, their productivity is much better than the US and the UK. And yet we all sometimes joke that they take 2-hour lunch breaks and have all of these holidays. And yeah, why? Because they actually know how to rest, relax, and stop.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important we look at these different types of IO and not just financial. So we look at strategic, capacity, and cultural as well to make sure that we're actually getting what we want out of it, not just necessarily return for our money as well. Because I think that's where technology becomes a real enabler.
Okay, I think we might have to end on that part because that is brilliant. I think it's important for organizations to think more strategically about what's happening, how they're leveraging their assets, which are their people in many cases, and how they're thinking about the longer view. I know we've talked about a little bit of short-term thinking here, but I think what if we could really focus on the longer term, leverage AI in the best ways? And I agree with you that I think there has to be a mixture of using AI and humans and working together to be able to get that because AI can't replace some of the things that you get when you work with a human, right? It's very different. So it's got a lot of pluses for sure, but it's not the entire replacement for all things. And I think that's the message that a lot of people are getting.
Yeah. And the one thing I say to anybody who's worried about their role and AI is go and spend some time sitting down figuring out what is your value as a human. And that could be as simple but as powerful as I can listen to people, or I can read the room, or I can make people laugh, or I can make people feel cared about. Because when you know your value, your real human value, then AI can't replace you. And you will find your space.
Love that. Oh my gosh, everybody, is she not brilliant? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that we had this conversation and we went to all the places that we went to. Is there anything that you want to share that I didn't ask you about though?
I don't think so. I think it's been a great conversation and really interesting topics. But for me, the human has to maintain its point, its center of gravity in our world, because the moment we lose sight of the other person sitting the other side of the table as being human rather than a salesperson or a plumber we end up losing our own humanity as well. And I think that would be the worst thing for all of us in this globe right now.
Exactly. Well, I want to let people know where they can reach out to learn more about you, learn about your book, learn about your podcast. Share a little bit about that.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Helen Honisett. I think I'm the only one. It's the joys of having a slightly different surname. Or you can find us at defyexpectations.co.uk. And our podcast, So You Want to Be a Leader, really is on Spotify, Apple, all of the standard platforms you'll find your podcast on.
So now I'm going to transition us into the 4 questions that I ask every guest. So I'm really excited to hear your answers. What do you think visibility is and why did you answer that way?
So visibility for me is also about relevancy. So it's not by it being seen by the millions. It's being seen by the people who you can support and help and serve. So for me, it's less about reach and more about relevance.
I love that because, yeah, if you can show your value to others, they'll see it, right? And understand what you can do. What are you doing to be visible?
Less than I used to. So, I mean, for example, I used to post on LinkedIn. I was always on videos. I've actually taken that down to like twice a week now. Because again, that sense of just being there doesn't feel authentic to A, where we are in the world right now, and B, actually the clarity of our message. We shouldn't just be coming up with things that we can say on a platform for saying its sake. So I'm visible on LinkedIn. I'm not a big social media fan. Actually, I came off most social media. So if you find me, I am on Facebook, I am on Instagram, but I do have to say that is managed by my marketing manager because I realized that actually one of my vices could be doom scrolling for hours and hours and hours. And I realized when my eldest child was only 10 months old that I had just spent the last 30 minutes where I could have been playing with him, scrolling through Facebook. So I came off all of them over a decade ago. But LinkedIn is where you will find me rather than my team. So that's for me, that's really about making sure that people understand who I am and what value they can get.
Love it. What is the best career or leadership advice you've received?
Be yourself. Seems really trite, but I, for a vast majority of my career, was attempting to be the successful white man in a suit, but I was rebelling a little bit by wearing a red dress. But I was trying to mimic so many people around me. And yes, absolutely. Mimicry is a great way to learn new behaviors that you want to embody, but you have to make them yours instead of just becoming. And I spent so much time just becoming what I thought successful people looked like. And to the detriment of my well-being, so I burnt out. And also, I think to the detriment of the people around me, because what happened was they weren't getting the leader that they actually deserved because they weren't getting me.
Wow. That's great self-awareness, though, to see that. Last question. What is a book you would recommend to the audience?
Letting Go by David R. Hawkins. So it's not a business book. It is very much a self-awareness and self-development book, but it's one of those books where I've most probably read it about 60 times now. And I
Wow.
will turn a page and I've read it. I know I've read it or I've listened to it on Audible and it will smack me around the back of the head again. And I will sit there and go, oh, right. Okay. It's an amazing mirror for us as humans to really understand and probe our humanity and truly understand what is holding us back and all of the wonderful emotions we have. Good, what are labeled good, like joy, happiness, laughter, etc., or what are labeled bad, anger, grief, fear, those sort of things, but actually put them in a context where there are no labels. It is just an emotion, and how to engage with them and how to really live as a full human in that full spectrum of what we can feel, because actually it's so rare in modern life that we're allowed to feel everything. But the moment we do, life becomes full of joy, life becomes full of color, and life becomes full of beauty. So it's one I recommend to a lot of people.
So I'm excited to read that. I'm going to definitely add it to the notes for everybody and all of Helen's information. I just want to thank you for being here, for what you're doing in the world for leadership, the clarity that you are providing for leaders, for organizations to really do the right things for themselves to help their business grow from an AI perspective. Just, you're being a great human all the way
Thank,
around.
thank you. It's what we all try to. And actually, I'm very, very lucky to be surrounded by great humans. So
Mhm.
it's a true privilege to do what we do on a daily basis.
Yes. Love it. Thanks, everybody, for joining today on the Visibility Factor podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.